What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue and I hope you're all doing well today. For this video, I decided to give Assassination a try out in Raid. While it isn't currently the talk of the town when it comes to rogue specializations, Assassination gains a sizable damage boost between tier and double legendaries, and is really the most consistent damage dealer of the three rogue specs. That and Assassination has some very satisfying burst damage when all your cooldowns line up, which is pretty fun. Now, a lot of people are all up into the Venthyr lifestyle for Assassination currently, but this build that I've been messing around with and enjoying takes us back to the forests of Ardenweald as a member of the Night Fae. The main reason I enjoy the Night Fae Assassination setup is because it is very easy to play around and requires only retraining your brain for your rotation just a little bit. It also plays into the class fantasy of hard-hitting poison effects with the Sepsis ability, which is a plus and can also do some very impressive damage with minimal effort. For Legendaries, we'll be pairing Duskwalker's Patch with our Unity effect, which as a Night Fae gives us the Toxic Onslaught legendary power. Toxic Onslaught, as Assassination, causes us to gain Adrenaline Rush and Shadow Blades for 10 seconds once the Sepsis debuff expires on whatever target we apply it to. This means free shadow damage and extra combo points generated via the Shadow Blades cooldown, and higher attack speed, a larger energy pool, and increased energy regeneration from the Adrenaline Rush buff. The Toxic Onslaught legendary effect will trigger if the Sepsis debuff lasts for the full 10 seconds, which causes that extra punch of damage, or if your target dies with the Sepsis debuff present on them. Our second legendary, Duskwalker's Patch, is frankly just insane because it reduces the cooldown of Vendetta, and Vendetta is buffed by our 4 set, and anything we apply Vendetta to will have the poisons and bleeds on it tick 100% faster, so more Vendettas means more of that 100% speed on your bleeds and poisons. For talents, Elaborate Planning is just a nice and free damage boost that we can keep rolling whenever we cast something that spends combo points. Subterfuge gains a lot of value with this build, since both our 2 set and our 4 sets buff the empowered garrots that we'll be casting whenever we vanish or whenever we're from stealth. Deeper Stratagem is not only my highest simming talent for this setup, but it's also really easy to play around, since we just deal more finisher damage naturally and have more combo points to work with so we don't accidentally over-generate them. This comes in handy due to how often you'll critically hit with combo point builders, which generate free combo points from Seal Fate. Alacrity is still a mandatory talent that will run because even though we have bleed bonuses on our tier set, Exsanguinate is still bad somehow. On a more serious note, Extra Haste is always good since it increases our energy generation, our auto attack speed, which means more poison applications, and our damage over time effect tick speed. Lastly, for single target I run Poison Bomb, and for anything with more than one target I run Crimson Tempest. Technically, even for single target, my sims on my character show Crimson Tempest is like 30 DPS better than Poison Bomb in single target, but for the hassle of hitting Crimson Tempest as often as you have to keep that debuff rolling, I just don't personally bother with it and I just run Poison Bomb in single target and call it a day. If you wanted to just run the same talents all the time though, then Crimson Tempest is massively better immediately at 2 targets and more, so yeah, you can just run Crimson Tempest all the time if you want to. For Soulbinds and Conduits, I run Dreamweaver with triple potency Conduits. Well-placed Steel is by far our strongest conduit, with Septic Shock and Lethal Poisons following a bit lower in performance. When playing Dreamweaver, you have to make sure you stand still whenever you cast Sepsis, as you'll be spawning a pile of flowers underneath you. Standing in them grants a 15% haste buff for 18 seconds, but for fights like Halandris this can be a bit annoying due to the running phase intermissions and moving around the boss to avoid the rotating beam attack and stuff. Naya would be an okay alternative if you don't want to deal with the whole standing in flowers thing, but it isn't really a big issue on that many other fights in my experience, so your mileage may vary. Stat-wise, a healthy amount of crit and haste will do you well in this setup, as the more we critically hit, the more chances we have for free combo points from the Seal Fate passive, whereas haste increases our attack speed, dot tick rate, and energy regen like I mentioned earlier. I strongly recommend simming your own character and your gear options using the Raid Bots website and the Top Gear simulation, since chasing a specific stat priority really isn't that effective and can actually be inaccurate based on what gear you actually have. For trinkets, and on-use stat effects like the Inscrutable Quantum Device or the First Sigil would both be quite good, though a lot of trinkets are performing pretty similarly nowadays, so just sim what you have available to you. The IQD can be a bit of a troll trinket if you aren't using a weak aura to keep an eye on it, so the First Sigil might be a better choice for you if you happen to get one and don't want to worry about accidentally giving a healer mana or something silly like that. Now that we've gone over the loadout of this build, let's talk about how it works, as well as the pros and cons of it. Being Night Fae Assassination is really simple. The big thing you need to train your brain to do is to line Shiv up with either Sepsis, Vendetta, or sometimes both at the same time. Since Shiv is a 25-second cooldown and Sepsis is a 1.5-minute cooldown, this means you'll be ending up holding Shiv for about 5 seconds each time after it comes off a cooldown. Vendetta becomes pretty much a 1-minute cooldown on the dot due to the amount of energy we spend thanks to the Duskwalker's patch legendary, so more often than not you'll have at least one cooldown that you can pair Shiv with. There are a few times in your rotation where you will use Shiv without any other cooldowns to line up with it, so keep that in mind and keep an eye on your other cooldowns timers. Though openers are kinda memey and don't really matter that much in raiding or PvE, I'll explain how I usually start a pull as Night Fae. You'll lead with a Garrote from Stealth, since we're running Subterfuge, and the combo point you earn from that Garrote will be spent on Slice and Dice. You'll then apply Sepsis, cast Ambush, Mutilate, and then spend however many combo points you have from those on a Rupture. After that, you'll pop your on-use stat trinket like IQD or Sigil, or if you have a racial like Berserking or anything like that, and you'll use Shiv and Vendetta at the same time since Vendetta is off the GCD. From there, we'll be generating combo points with Mutilate and spending them on Envenoms as needed until our empowered Subterfuge from Stealth runs out, since we want to make sure we use every tick of that Garrote as we can. If you're running Crimson Tempest, then you'll instead want to make sure you have a Crimson Tempest up and keep it rolling constantly. When your first Garrote expires, you'll want to pop Vanish so you can slap another empowered Garrote on the boss. Since we're running Subterfuge, you can squeeze in a regular ambush as well, and be mindful of the free ambushes you get from when the Sepsis debuff expires on the boss too. When you're running the 4-set bonus for Assassination with Vendetta, you'll notice that your Garrotes, instead of being an 18-second long buff, will be 9 seconds instead. This means that instead of refreshing them around 6 seconds like you normally would, you'll actually refresh them around 3 seconds, since that's basically the 100% increase of the speed on your dots. It's being taken off of the timer of the dots as well. So keep that in mind, and make sure you do that with your Garrotes, Ruptures, and if you're running Crimson Tempest, the same thing. With the Subterfuge talent, you do want to keep in mind that you're supposed to let your Garrote fall off completely if it's one that you cast after Vanish or from Stealth. So if you have one that just came off from a Vanish, then let it go off all the way and then refresh the Garrote once there's nothing left of it, basically. After you're back into your usual debuff management simulator that is Assassination, then you'll want to make sure that you keep an eye on the timings of Sepsis, Vendetta, and Shiv. Every time you use Vendetta or Sepsis, you should have a Shiv ready and waiting for it. There are times when neither Vendetta nor Sepsis are active or available to be used, so just double check the cooldowns remaining on them and use Shiv appropriately. You'll want to cast Sepsis before Shiv every time, since the Shiv bonus nature damage and the well-placed steel conduit and the 2-set bonus only last for the 9-second duration of Shiv, and Sepsis' debuff lasts for 10 seconds. Basically, the idea is you want Sepsis to fall off before the Shiv bonuses wear off. That way that big hit at the end of the Sepsis is buffed by everything. This is where you have to hold Shiv for about 5 seconds and it becomes very important. Otherwise you're wasting a good chunk of damage every time you cast Sepsis. As far as the pros of this build, the biggest one is that it's honestly pretty easy to play. The rotation doesn't really change at all outside of holding on to Shiv for a few seconds and just lining up your cooldowns consistently. You also avoid dealing with any of the weird haste snapshotting shenanigans that you have to mess with if you're Venthyr to get the big damage gains out of it. So if you're not playing at an overly competitive level, or if you don't really wrap your head around that idea very well, then this setup can do very solid and consistent numbers with a lot less effort. You also do get access to Soul Shape, which is very useful in some encounters since we only get one charge of Shadow Dance as Assassination. As far as downsides of the build, it doesn't really handle multi-target nearly as well as Venthyr or Necrolord could. You also have to stay in a fairly small area whenever you cast Sepsis due to Dreamweaver's Field of Blossoms haste buff thing, which can be honestly impossible in some situations depending on the timing of the fight or the difficulty and the mechanics of the certain boss that you're dealing with. Outside of that, it's a pretty solid build and can do respectable damage with very low effort. And you get to run around as a llama or a hippo if you really want, which has to be worth at least a few points of DPS to some people. You will likely see far more Venthyr Assassination rogues around, and a fair number of Necrolords too, so this isn't like some ultra secret meta build that nobody knows about or whatever, but if you happen to be a fan of the Night Fae, then I would suggest giving this setup a try. Anyways folks, I hope you enjoyed this little build overview for Night Fae Assassination. If you did, let me know in the comments. I'll probably be doing a subtlety rogue video on the next round of these to get all 3 specs in there, cause why not? As always, my appreciation and gratitude to all of my viewers and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.